Topless women, cocaine and mobsters. This was a summary of one of undercover agent Giovanni Rocco's first experiences with the Mafia. Let's check it out. I'm James Gladwish and welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. I often get asked by viewers for book recommendations. So moving forward each week, in addition to the usual 2 history videos, I will be uploading segments from a variety of books that I enjoy. Today, we're going to take a look at the book Giovanni's Ring. These videos won't be for everyone, but as stated, they will be in addition to the regular 2 history videos that you see each week on this channel. Giovanni Rocco, the author of the book Giovanni's Ring, is a former undercover federal operative. In his remarkable career, he went deep undercover with the mob in New Jersey, infiltrating the DeCavalcante Crime Family, who, according to some sources, were part of the inspiration for the hit TV show The Sopranos. Giovanni Rocco wrote the excellent book Giovanni's Ring, based on his time undercover with New Jersey's DeCavalcante Crime Family, where he was also in contact with mobsters from New York's crime families, such as the Gambinos. The following extract covers a time from Giovanni Rocco's youth. This story covers Rocco's early experiences with the Italian-American Mafia, a story that opened Rocco's eyes to a world of topless women, cocaine, and wise guys. Pete was married to my father's sister. Over the years, he'd always been more of an older brother to me than an uncle. He was a truck driver and a master mechanic, and he had lots of friends who were hardcore bikers. But he was always there to talk me through trouble, kick my ass when it was called for, and guide me back to the right path. He'd been in some tough fights of his own during his life. One time he'd been stabbed, and another time had his head caved in with a hammer, but he'd survived. Looking back today, I have to say that if it weren't for Pete, I'd probably be dead. I say that because, as a tenured professor at the University of Bayonne, Pete was second to none. He'd always cut a broad swath through life, but he had an unerring instinct for determining exactly where the dividing line was. He would often toe that line and test that line, but he would never cross it. I definitely learned a lot from him. One day, I was out in front of our apartment, tinkering on a 1969 GTO I had recently bought from my aunt, when Pete pulled up. He was behind the wheel of a fully loaded black Chevy Suburban. This vehicle was totally out of reach for people in our financial stratum. I guessed he must have been doing some sort of mechanical or cosmetic work for the owner, but I joked, "Who the hell did you steal this from?" As always, his response was quick and sarcastic. "You're a shit mechanic and you don't know what the fuck you're doing fixing that car. I'll help you with it later. Get in and take a ride with me. I gotta go down to a house in Mantoloking." Mantoloking is a community on the Jersey Shore. It is also the wealthiest borough in the state. Whenever Uncle Pete asked me to take a ride with him, I always jumped at the chance. It usually meant we were going to have a blast. This was several years before Pete was diagnosed with the cancer that would eventually kill him. But he always pushed life to the edge, which was precisely why I always jumped at any chance to be his co-pilot. A drive down to Mantoloking could mean just about anything, so I ducked into the house, washed up, and ran back out to join him. As soon as I jumped into the Suburban, I knew my guess that he must have been doing some cosmetic work had to be wrong. The vehicle was brand new, with hardly any miles on it, and it was equipped with all the bells and whistles. We burned through Staten Island at an unsafe speed, and then hit the Garden State Parkway. There, as always in the warmer months, it was bumper-to-bumper traffic. As we crawled along, he said, "Check this out," and opened the center console. Inside was a cellular telephone. I'd heard about them, but had never actually seen one. The technology was new, and everyone was saying they would put payphones out of business. Back then, it probably cost a mortgage payment to purchase one of those phones, and God knows how much per minute to make a call. Pete picked it up and started making calls. Pete's impatience with the traffic finally got the better of him, and his recklessness kicked in. He swung out into the grass median and raced ahead to cut off as much traffic as he could. At an increasing speed, it felt like we were the feature act in a monster truck show. Dirt and grass flew each time the front of the vehicle launched off the ground and then touched down. I was laughing hysterically and fearing for my life at the same time. With my stomach in my mouth, I blurted, "Pete, better slow down. The owner's going to be pissed if we crash." "Whose is it anyway?" His reply stunned me. "My boss's. It's Tony's new truck. Nice, right?" My laughter evaporated, replaced by cold fear. Pete's boss was Tony Cerundolo. "Are you frigging kidding me? Your boss that owns the trucking company that's controlled by Johnny DiGilio's crew." "Yeah, don't worry, it's his company car," he replied, just before he screamed out the window at the other drivers sitting in traffic. "You gotta slow down, man. This ain't cool. You mess this truck up and somebody's gonna kill you." John DiGilio had been a made member within the Genovese crime family, and he controlled the unions in the Bayonne MOTBY and the ports. He and other family members had recently been tried in a federal court for racketeering offences. DiGilio refused to retain a lawyer, and instead represented himself. He beat the charges, but his co-defendants were all convicted. This had a severe impact on the Genovese control of the Longshoremen's Union, which was ultimately lost to the Gambino family. Because of this, the Genovese administration arranged for members of DiGilio's own crew to murder their boss. Johnny D, as he was known, was shot and killed by two of Bayonne's very own. Louis Arricchio, the brother-in-law of a New Jersey senator, and George Weingartner, a retired Bayonne police sergeant. John DiGilio's body had just recently surfaced in the Hackensack River, and as I mentioned earlier, my father had shown me one of the autopsy photos. Knowing all of this filled me with dread. I begged my uncle to slow down. After processing what I was telling him, he pulled back into traffic, and we had a longer but far more relaxing drive to the house in Mantoloking. We arrived at what to my adolescent eyes looked like a Renaissance palace. It was situated right on the water and featured all the typical Italianate flourishes, including a fountain in the front and giant statues of lions. Pete rang the bell. Within seconds, the huge front door opened, and standing there was a stunningly beautiful girl, wearing nothing but a bikini bottom. Her simple greeting was, "Hi you guys, come on in." The interior of the house was just as impressive as the outside, right down to the double Viking refrigerators and Carrara marble throughout the house. Yes, I managed to notice all that when I wasn't gaping at the half-naked girl. Pete and I were greeted by his boss, Tony Cerundolo. The first thing he asked me was what I thought of his new truck. Feeling like I was about to pass out, I managed to respond, "Yeah, it's great." He walked us out back where there was a small party going on, with gangsters and beautiful half-dressed women. They all greeted us with handshakes and smiles. My uncle seemed to know most of them, and I recognised a few faces from the neighbourhood. They were all drinking, and on a table was a small bowl of cocaine that the girl seemed to be paying a lot of attention to. After each of us had drunk a beer, I could tell my uncle realised he needed to get me out of there. If my father found out that his brother-in-law had taken me to a mob gathering with booze, cocaine and topless women, there was a good chance Pete would end up in the hospital. Cerundolo ordered a couple of the goons to hoist 2 large coolers and stow them in the back of the Suburban. He told me to pick up a smaller cooler that was sitting nearby. I picked it up reluctantly. my mind racing with questions. What the hell's inside this thing? Is it dope? Is it body parts? As we made our way outside, I was mightily relieved to hear Cherundolo explain that they'd been out on a tuna fishing trip and the coolers were filled with the catch. He said the smaller cooler was for us as payment for making the drive down and hauling the coolers back to Bayonne. We drove back and delivered the large coolers without incident, and Pete dropped me off at home later that evening. As I entered our apartment, my mother asked me where I'd been. She was understandably nervous because one minute I'd been working on my car, and the next minute I disappeared for parts unknown with crazy Uncle Pete. I handed over several thick tuna steaks and told her the story, leaving out some of the more questionable and racy details. She was very happy to make room for the tuna in our very tiny freezer, while my father, who'd been sitting there listening to my account, just rolled his eyes. In the months that followed, every time Mum cooked us up some tuna steaks, I thought about the house and those mobsters. But most of all, I thought about all those gorgeous, half-naked women. I hope you found that book extract interesting. Thanks for watching.